Oh, goody.
Alright, what's going on everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, I wanted to go over my top 5 favorite cards of 2023. It'd be fun to go back and take a look at my favorite cards that were released last year, and talk a little bit about why I like them so much and why I think they are generally a pretty good thing to have in the game. These aren't necessarily rated in any particular order. I think all 5 of them are great and serve different and unique purposes for what they're trying to accomplish. Starting off first here with Jeff the Baby Landshark. So Jeff is my most played card every month. When we get our little monthly recap, it is always Jeff. And a huge part of that is just the fact that Jeff is incredibly splashable in so many decks. Jeff is just really solid. 2-3 has always been that really solid 2-drop stat line, and his ability helps you deal with otherwise very annoying locations or possible lockdown situations. Really though, I think the most fun element of Jeff isn't even necessarily that nothing can stop him, even though that is really great and it's a kind of unique thing about him. Just the fact that you can move this card once a game dramatically changes how it can impact the game, and it provides a layer of managing your board and decisions that's a little bit deeper than just which card you played where every turn. As a fan of both move and lockdown archetypes, Jeff has shined in both those decks as he promotes both those strategies very effectively, and he's definitely got even more of a boost recently with the addition of Miss Marvel, who favors you spreading your cards more around the board to get her benefit. I honestly think Jeff is about as close as you can get to a card that is easy to slot and pseudo auto include without being incredibly unhealthy for the game, as at the end of the day it's just a regularly statted card with a lot of flexibility surrounding it. Given how much people generally seem to hate locations that prevent you from doing stuff, or cards that prevent you from putting things down in a location, it should be no surprise that Jeff is a big favorite for many people in Marvel Snap, plus he's just the most wholesome little guy. And next up we have Iron Lad. So what I really like about Iron Lad is this card promotes interesting deck building. Now you can use it kind of simplistically. I think one of the most auto things that comes to mind is just Doctor Doom, because when your Lad hits a Doctor Doom and you get some Doom bots, then you have the threat of playing Doom again on the final turn. It can be pretty overwhelming for the opponent. But in general, just the fact that it encourages you to build your deck around copying text of valuable cards, I think is very interesting. It changes how the card plays a lot of the time, which is something I really like. And the RNG factor of it is honestly something I think could be very fun. It feels rather similar to something like Lockjaw or Jubilee, where getting to see the animation go off and see what you copy is a pretty exciting moment in the game. The other thing that Lad does here is provide consistency, and consistency is a very powerful thing in a game with such small deck sizes and limits to one of each card. We've definitely seen the power of being able to replay strong effects recently with Bounce, or even in just some of the locations that provide copies of cards, and Lad gives you that redundancy alongside a very solidly statted body. The other thing that's cool about this card is it's one of those cards that has the potential to only get better over time. As more cards are printed, there are more synergies for Iron Lad to take advantage of, so it's a card that we will constantly see get better and better as more powerful card effects are added into the game. I think the only thing that's a little bit sad about Iron Lad is the fact that it was really hard for people to get a hold of him for a while. He only just made his second return to Spotlight caches the other week, so that was a little bit of a bummer. A lot of people wanted this card and weren't able to get him on release, and the fact that he was very clearly designed to pair with Howard the Duck, and well, aside from Howard's most devout fans, we really don't see Howard often making the cut in Iron Lad decks, because there's just a lot of other cards you would rather have, rather than a card that helps you understand when your Iron Lad is going to hit the best things possible. Up next we have Ravonna Renslayer. So Ravonna, I think, is the only card on this list that actually has seen a very significant buff since her initial release. Ravonna was the only card during the month of September that really felt like it did not hit the bar, both because of the general power level of the card, but also in the context of the metagame surrounding it, with original 3-5 Loki releasing before her and 2-3 Mobius releasing shortly after her. This card really did not have room to breathe when it first came out, and it took them a little while to actually buff Ravonna to give her a better shot at succeeding. On the surface, this card isn't all that different from what current Zabu is doing. It's just providing a powerful one-cost reduction to a certain subset of cards. But in general, the restriction here I think that makes the card much more interesting than Zabu, where you're limited to a specific cost of card, whereas Ravonna, you're trying to take advantage of a card with a small amount of power. I think the reason this is interesting is often those cards that have this 1 or less power usually have that low power because they are being accompanied by a powerful effect. So in general, I find that the gameplay this card promotes has been more interesting than Zabu, where you're just getting a 4-drop out a turn early, or having some more flexibility in playing multiple of them going into the final turn of the game. As a big fan of Mr. Negative, I really like what she does in that deck, providing some much needed redundancy in getting negative down on turn 3, as well as benefiting from a lot of the cards we naturally want to run in negative anyway. But it's also cool to see this card in combination with things like White Tiger and Ironheart, who previously hadn't seen a whole ton of play outside of the early Pool 1, Pool 2 metas, but Ravonna has actually done a fair bit of work in making those cards a little bit more competitive than they otherwise would have been. Now, trying to make this card work when it released was pretty miserable, I will admit. She initially got buffed to a 2-1, and even trying that out, it still felt like it just wasn't good enough. The difference in stats here was really huge. You were essentially taking a pretty big loss of tempo and fighting for the board when you were playing a 2-1, and the mana cost reduction you were having just didn't seem to be enough to make up for that bad turn 2 play. But now that she is more aggressively statted at the 2-3 ratio, she feels just like a really solid card to play on turn 2 that enables a lot of other powerful synergies within the deck. Then we have what is probably, definitely the most controversial pick here, Alioth. This card was crazy. This card released as a 6/5 that destroyed all enemy cards here, even if they were unrevealed. I don't think I have ever seen so much hate for a card since probably the original Galactus. I think that takes the cake for the most hated thing by the general population, or at least the engaged population of Marvel Snap. But this was a close second for a lot of players. The lockdown style has generally been disliked by a large portion of the community, and giving lockdown and, I mean, at the same time, even Galactus a way to just completely close out the game as long as they had priority was a pretty controversial thing to do. The thing I liked about this card was that for a long time in a lot of the metas we had last year, it was really beneficial to throw priority. So make it so your opponent flips first and then react to their stuff rather than play your own proactive threats. Now, I like some good reactive gameplay, but there's a balance that I think needs to be met where you want to be promoting both styles of playing proactively versus playing reactively, and this card did a lot to push that more proactive playstyle forward. Now, it was pretty clearly overstated at release. It kind of dominated the metagame quite a bit. It was being slot into a ton of different things, and that is usually the mark of a card that's going to get nerfed, when it's easily slotting into a wide variety of decks without having to do any real serious deck building restrictions around it. First nerf, bringing it from a 6/5 to a 6/3, did bring it a little bit more in line, but it's the second nerf that really took it down a peg, not only going from 6/3 to 6/2, but now no longer being able to blow up cards played that turn if the person playing the card did not have priority. Ultimately, I think the reason they came down to this decision was a lot of people like to see how the game plays out in Marvel Snap, and that was one of the big feel bads, is players didn't like the feeling that their cards weren't even getting to be revealed. It was just kind of a feels bad, and I think the developers thought over time people would play less of it or learn to play around it, where they'd say, oh, if this is going to beat me, I should probably just lose. That didn't happen, so now they made it so that the only way this card can screw you over is if your opponent has priority. I actually don't mind this nerf a whole ton, even though I did like the original card. I think this makes it very clear when this card is going to beat you and when it won't. I do think it's a little sad they bumped it down to 6/2. I think 6/3 was kind of fine. I think that was a little unnecessary, but it is what it is. I don't think it's going to actually matter in the vast majority of games. I'm really in favor of cards that are pushing for that ability to be rewarded for having priority, and I think this card did it in a great way that we really hadn't seen much since the original Arrow nerf almost a year ago. And then we get to our final card here, Nico Minoru, and I know I said this isn't in any particular order, but I think Nico's got to have the biggest W here in terms of just how interesting this card is to play and how different it feels. I really think the only other card in the game that is kind of similar, at least a little bit, to this card is High Evolutionary, where it's many cards inside one card. That's obviously a little bit different since the high evo text is static. Every high evo evolved card is always going to be doing the same thing, whereas Neeko is going to be changing per game. But I really love all the different effects, and they're all good effects generally. Turning something into a demon, destroying a card to draw to, moving a card to the right. This is the most situational one, but sometimes it's relevant as well. Giving +2 power to the next card you play, changing a location, getting a copy to your hand, and doubling Neeko's power are all really powerful abilities on their own, but I don't think it's just for power reasons is why I like this card. I like the kind of gameplay it promotes, where since Neeko is changing every turn, you always kind of have to adapt your plays with her rather than be planning for a specific outcome as soon as you have Neeko in hand. In a game like Snap where the deck sizes are small and the games are quick, some decks kind of feel very samey after a while. And I think one of the main reasons people like Neeko so much is not only can she succeed in a number of different archetypes very successfully, but the gameplay of playing her is interesting as it challenges the player to do different things with her most games. There's also a really cool risk-reward factor to this card, where if there is a specific effect from Neeko that is the best for your deck, you can kind of hedge your bet on, do I want to make use of the effect she has now, which seems pretty good, or do I want to try and hold out for later and hope I get that effect that is the best of the bunch? And this all combines really well with the fact that she's a 1-drop, so that helps make her splashable in a lot of decks, and it enables playing her multiple times in bounce shells, so you are interacting with the different effects multiple times per game sometimes. It's probably pretty hard to design a ton of cards like this without having huge complexity creep on the game, as this is arguably more complex than I think they really want a lot of the cards in Marvel Snap to be. But I think that's part of what makes it special and so beloved by the community, is the fact that the design is so interesting and promotes gameplay that is very different match to match. So yeah, that is my top 5 cards for 2023. I'd love to hear from you though in the comments below. What were your 5 favorite cards of the year? We had a lot of cool cards released this year. It was kind of hard to pick this list, but all these cards really stood out for me, so wanted to share it. But yeah, let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you like this style of video. I'm working on a top decks of the last year. I think it'll be kind of neat to go back in the past and see what were the breakout successes we had throughout 2023, and maybe that'll provide some interesting information to compare to as we see the new meta shape throughout this year in 2024. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.